Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. What is it like to become a pilot in midlife? The challenges are unique, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences. On this episode, Ted will talk all things sport pilot and LSA, and while Ben is off vacationing in seaplanes to avoid hosting the show, Mark, also known as One Dull Geek, steps in to replace Ben's southern accent with a Midwestern drawl, Don Chinoa. Okay, AI intro and checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
All right, welcome to episode 65 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we talk all things flying and aviation in midlife. I am Brian, a private pilot, Nashville-based, home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie. I fly a Cherokee 180 named Lucy. And filling in for Ben, not me, I'm not doing very well with this intro, but filling in for Ben ultimately as we're down a man. So we have a deep bench that we can go to, but filling in for Ben is Mark, aka One Dull Geek, longtime friend of the show, contributor, and now the fourth host of a 3-host show, who flies a Cherokee 235 that has no name and is a newly minted commercial pilot. Mark, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Do you have to, if you're going to substitute for Ben, do you have to be a commercial pilot? Is that like a requirement?
No, but you need to talk like this. You need to.
I can't do that. I can pull out the Wisconsin accent if I have to. But I did. Oh, wait, Brian, did you feel that? There was a subtle shift in power in the show. The low wings have taken over.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's right. We're back. We are back. Now, if I ever get at 140, I'm just throwing this whole low wing army thing to the wind. I do not care. But yeah. So, and we also have, of course, Ted, sport pilot from Portlandia, flies a flight design CTLS that we call the Egg. And Ted, welcome.
Hey, I'm the only high wing in the crowd now. I'm feeling bullied right here. I'm not used to this.
Well, you always have the ultimate comeback, which is I have 2 doors and I can park my car in the hangar.
Yeah. Also, hey, how many gallons per hour does your plane take?
Oh, shut up.
Well, that's why they call it the 235, right? It's 235
miles per hour.
Yeah. So, so real quick, we'll just knock this housekeeping out and we'll get to it. But I'm super excited to talk about our topic tonight, which will be all about the sport pilot license. And obviously, Ted is the in-house expert for that. And honestly, it's just something that we haven't talked enough about. So I'm super excited about that. Housekeeping. Guess what? We can tell you about Patreon. We can tell you about how to do a PayPal drop. We can tell you where to get the latest episodes. We can tell you where to do all these things. But we have a website. We made a website. You just go to this one place and then you do all the things there. So it's midlifepilotpodcast.com. And if you want to send us feedback or anything, that's where it all happens. So that's how we just breeze through the housekeeping part. And then ultimately just keep in mind that we love getting the feedback. We'll be reading a little bit tonight, and send us your reviews, your thoughts, ruminations, complaints. We actually got a complaint about our website, which I think is why we built the website now that I think about it. So, we're very responsive. Ted, I think we got one in here about, demanding that you shave your head for the next episode. So we'll oblige, right? Like, whatever people ask for, we will give them.
The people ask, I must do it. Yeah.
So that'd be a real humdinger though when you find out that was actually nobody ever. So
humdinger.
Humdinger. Yeah. I'm trying to come up with like midlife. That's a very midlife term, don't you think? Humdinger?
Maybe. It just struck me as like you're trying too hard to be Ben.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you're using very southern aphorisms and things
look,
like that.
I am also from the South.
True.
So, like, here's how we would say if you see a car go by with your mother in it and the rest of the family, and you're not in the car, you're just watching them go by, you say, "Oh, well, there goes Mom and him and all." So,
I don't know how you spell that, but yes,
it's like a chemical, but it's just it's like something I think that you use to make meth. I'm not quite sure, but anyway. So, speaking of meth, we have a Patreon. we have a Patreon, and I swear that's not what it gets used for, but you can support us, and we really appreciate it. We have multiple tiers that you can join in on, and there's various levels of sticker mailings or bonus content or other benefits. So if you just go to our website, midlifepilotpodcast.com, you can learn more about how to support us on Patreon. And that has been a real boost and very timely that we've had such a great response to our new Patreon. For those that are not subscribey, Patreon-y kind of people, we also have on our website a place where you can just do a one-time PayPal drop. So we love those too. But ultimately, we're here. We're making it happen. And, we would be doing this without the support, but we love having the support, and especially the feedback that's been increasing and getting better. Keep that stuff coming. It helps us understand too, like what we want to talk about and what we don't. But anyway, so super excited. Ted, I think you were going to hit us up. You were going to let us know who the new
are.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of new supporters from last week, and we'll talk about one of those in a minute. But at the Beast Stole level, we've got Mike D, and at Hershey Bar, we've got Wendy R, and at Landomatic, we have Eric P. And Wendy actually sent us an email. Do you want to share that, or you want to do that later?
No, we can get right into it. Actually, okay. I kind of like doing the feedback at the top. Yeah, I like doing the feedback at the top also. Yeah. Hey, we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
As much as we've been doing this for 2.5 years, it's really only been the last few months that now we're like, okay, this is weekly, and we are on a grind now. So let's just keep hammering. Okay, so I really love it when it's nice to have moments where you feel like you're not doing this in a vacuum, and that there are people that are hearing what's being said and it matters, or it's helpful to them in some way, especially from the kind of awkward place that we are. There are other podcasts that are much more instructive because the people involved have the experience and the professional certifications in order to be instructive. We are looking to be, I think, more the sort of the pilot friend, that maybe you don't have in your local area, or just another place to go to kind of have your brain stirred by pilot talk. Anyway, so I'm just going to read this email real quick from Wendy. Wendy R, right? Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, here's Wendy R. I'm so happy to have found your podcast and to be able to be part of the fun on Patreon. By the way, she's referring to our Discord, which is a pretty exciting place, and that's something you get when you join Patreon. Okay. I was introduced to your show by my friend Colin C. We did the same online class, ground school, in 2022. Shout out to Colin. Colin's a good guy and also in our Discord. Friend of the show. I'm pretty new to aviation in the grand scheme of things. Okay, I'm pretty new to aviation in the grand scheme of things. I took my first discovery flight just 2 years ago, started training in Aurora, Oregon. In July 2022, moved my training to Twin Oaks Airport last March and got my private certificate this past September. Since then, I've been working on my instrument training at Twin Oaks, and I'm loving it, though the weather and finances sometimes things are slower than I would like. We all know that very much. It's always weather and finances. So if you can't pay off the weather guy either. You know what I mean? There's nobody to... Anyway, I haven't done much flying outside of my training. Long story I can share another time. or with other folks, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm so happy to have found your podcast. It's been incredibly helpful in lots of ways. You guys are informative and funny, and the topics have been on point for my flying life lately. It's also fun to hear Ted talk about flying to places and events that I know about. I'm excited to join the Discord and become part of the community. My midlife pilot goal is to get all the way through CFII and instruct long term. I'd like to eventually work with one of the electric aviation companies that are just about to launch their service to the world stage. Ted, since you're local, I'd love to share with you an aviation community announcement, and feel free to pass it on to whomever you'd like. So here it is on the whole podcast, right? The 99s, parentheses, the Women Flying Pilot Club, part of the Amelia Earhart Foundation. If you're not familiar with the 99s, go check it out. It's a very great and storied organization. Columbia Cascade chapter, Portland/Vancouver, is hosting a companion flying seminar next week, March 9th at Cascadia Tech Academy. We like to keep our show evergreen, but you know what? If you've got a show that or an event or something that you're wanting to get the word out on, we would love to help. So thanks so much for that feedback. And we apologize for whatever Ted may have told you.
Yeah. So strangely, to make this go full circle, we have Mark T in our chat tonight, and he and his wife are going to that seminar already. So Mark is someone that I fly with a bit, and he's they're signed up for that. So I think that's this Saturday. The 9th. Yeah. So this
Awesome.
Saturday the 9th in the Portland area. So she started at Aurora, Oregon, which is great to try to say that several times fast. That's the home of Vans Aircraft. And then she went over to Twin Oaks, which is the next airport over, which is the little one that I learned at. And which is kind of the spiritual home of Vans. So it's all in our community in that way. But
That's all.
Looking forward to flying with her at some point. And it is fun to hear from that. And it's fun that she heard about it from Colin, who we know Colin.
It's a small world, but I also just couldn't help but take note of the intelligent point of view of understanding the imminent technology that's coming with electric aircraft, and wanting to be on the forefront of that, I think, is a really cool thing. And we've got several people in the Discord that are connected to different entities in that realm, and it's fascinating. It's wild. Yeah. So there's no carb ice, but anyways, well, let's go ahead and get into our topic. And I will definitely say right away that I deliberately, was it our last episode we were talking about knowledge gaps?
Yeah.
I have a lot of knowledge gaps when it comes to the differences between sport and private privileges. And I remember I was at some airport in the Outer Banks when we were doing that thing with Chris and everybody, the midlife pilot fly-in or OG fly-in. And I remember some guy pulled in to Currituck where we were. Geek, were you there? I think it was.
Yeah, I was there.
I know you were at the event, but I don't know if you were at this particular moment. But there was a guy that just rolled up, and I don't even know what kind of plane it was. It was some sort of like a hybrid land sea air. It was like almost like a Sport Osprey or something. You know what I mean? It was like a.
Yeah, I remember that plane.
Yeah.
Was it the Icon A5?
No.
It might have been, but I don't think it was at that high end.
Okay.
In that realm. But I just remember, I'm pretty sure I think it was more like this is just what it felt like than what it actually was. But I felt like the guy and his girlfriend just kind of tumbled out of this plane. They looked like they'd just been hanging out on the beach all day, shirtless, and just like, I kind of in my mind envisioned him just getting out with an open beer already, But
I remember that guy being quite a character.
Yeah, he was totally a character. And I'll have to say that for whatever reason, because I remember asking him about the plane and he was sort of talking about sport pilot license, and I was just like, my first impression of sport pilot privileges was just like, if you just don't want If you just don't want to play by the rules and you want to be like in sort of like the cannonball run of aviation, this is like the
Wild West.
Yeah, like the gravel parking lot part of aviation or something, which is totally not the case. But I just thought that would be an interesting way to start talking about this and to get you to talk about it, which is to say, maybe a good place to begin is for those of us who maybe have misperceptions about sport pilot privileges and how it differs from private pilot certification. What would be on a high level a way that you would characterize the difference to somebody without necessarily getting into deep regulations or airplane specs or speeds or things like that?
Yeah, to summarize it, I think the parts that people think of are, number one, you don't need a medical. In fact, it's kind of important that you don't go for a medical if you think you may not pass it. So you don't need a medical. You use your driver's license as a medical. The planes you fly are more limited, and you can only fly during the day. And I guess with one passenger is the other kind of big number there. So those are, at a high level, that's the difference. Some people really quickly latch on to, you're only required to do 20 hours instead of 40 to become a sport pilot. It's like, yeah, I don't know if anybody can do it at 20 hours. Like that's incredible. But there's a lot of differences, and it's kind of a different model. First, the numbers are really small. There are 7,000 active sport pilots versus about 165,000 private pilots.
Oh.
So the numbers are, it's 1 to 5%, the number. So that's why you think, I haven't really run into many. Well, that's why. There's about 230 new sport pilots per year compared to, let's see, what are my numbers here? Compared to 24,000 private pilots per year. So literally 1% new pilots are sport pilots. So that's why you may not run into very many, because those numbers are really small. So
is that because it's limited via the plane? Is there so like, I know that the airplanes that you can fly are light sport planes, right? Or is it is the planes that you can fly defined by being in the light sport category or by some sort of set of criteria around it?
I usually say it's the light sport category. It's not quite, because there are old planes that still qualify. Your Piper Cub and a few, kind of ancient planes like that still are in that category. But it's really easy for them to go over that weight limit. There's a 20 pound weight limit. So something like a Cessna 140 is over it by about 100 pounds. And so it's not included in that category, even though realistically, a Cessna 140 should be in that category. And we can talk about how it's changing everything. But yeah, there's obviously a huge limitation because of the access to the planes. When I was in Nashville, a year and a half ago, I wanted to fly. There's only one light sport in town, and it was the Skycatcher, right? So that's why I flew a Skycatcher, and because I wanted to fly something, and that's what was there.
The Flycatcher.
The Flycatcher, yeah, from Sam and Eric. I guess Sam is kind of a honorary midlife, and then Eric, who is a midlifer in our crowd. So yeah.
Well, so here's something I've always been curious about. Now, some people might say this is not the case, but it might be fair to assume that in the world of aviation and among pilots, there can be, from time to time, a little bit of bravado and a little bit of ego. Is that, Mark? No, I'm just kidding. I mean, is that fair? Is that a fair characterization of the aviation community, that while we are very humble and safety focused and all this, there can be, I think, in this world, people that are a little sure. Fair enough? Okay.
Yeah.
And there can also be a little bit of competitiveness, ratings, Mark. No, I'm just
wow.
I'm just saying, I love you too, Brian. I love you too, man.
No, it's just an intervention.
I'm just joking because it's like all the things I'm saying, like you are the person to envy more than anything because you've just been blazing through all this stuff. But I guess what this is all lead up to is just to say, I feel like I have perceived and maybe even in my own mind have a little bit of a bias, but I feel like there's a little bit of a sort of sport is lesser than private comparative mentality in the aviation world, right? Like it's sort of like, you know, you see how aviation community people can react to drone pilots, right? Just like the downhill rolling of S that happens when somebody says I'm a drone pilot. It's like, oh yeah, okay,
Yes.
You know. I'm not saying it's to that extent, but I feel like there's a little bit of a possible, but kind of bias there. And Ted, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, there you go. So I was just wondering if you've sensed that or felt that, whether it's in your own mind or from other people.
Yeah, I absolutely feel that. There's a lot of misunderstandings about sport and what you're allowed to do. It's often seen as kind of that baby step, and it kind of is. It's a lot more restrictive, but it's also a decent option, right? And I like flying newer planes. My friend Mark, who has this private, as he says here in the comments, Mark says, I have my private, but fly an SLSA, and I'm working on my CFI Sport.
Yeah.
So, there's some of it is because of the planes that you're in, and it's like, oh, well, you're just flying a light sport, and it's like, oh, they're so great though, and it's nice to fly something that is young, that is fresh, and so I like that. But it is more limiting. There's no question about it, and it certainly limits if you are if you're young and you're headed on the career track. It doesn't make any sense to do it, right? Because you can't move up without having your private and working your way through instrument, commercial, everything else. So it only makes sense to do it for fun, to do it for what we do, right? Which is just for the enjoyment of it.
Yeah. Well, so Captain Todd has a question here. He prefaces it as a real question. This is a real question. Ted, do you want to move to PPL night flight instrument?
I didn't, because you don't get any night flight experience as a sport pilot in training, and you do a tiny bit of foggles work, and that's it. It's not on the practical test or anything else. But you do zero night, and I didn't have any desire until I had about 200 hours, and then it was like, oh man, I kind of want that now. And certainly around here in the winter when it's getting dark by 5, start to understand wanting it, and it was just getting that much experience that I wanted to. Now, a lot of people don't understand what a sport pilot can do at night or where that limit is, and like most of the things with sport, you have to know what your limitations are, because nobody else will, right? CFI won't know it or anything else. So, as a sport pilot, you're allowed to fly until nautical twilight, right? Which is roughly half an hour past sunset. And I had to nerd out and really figure out when that was and when I was kind of safe to fly. And it changes by altitude. Trust me, it's about 34 minutes here, summer and winter. By the time you get down to like LA or Florida, it's maybe 28 minutes. So roughly figure 30 minutes past sunset. But that's my limit. And so I've gone out and enjoyed flying, doing some pattern work there until about the moment that I turn into a pumpkin. And because that's as close as I can get to flying at night. I didn't want to do that before. And man, you really don't want to plan a cross country that's getting close to that, because you're not legal past that. And
Yep.
so I do wish that I could do that. And in the same way, I've become interested in instrument work. Now, in order for me to go instrument, I have to go private instrument with the medical and everything else. And that might be something I do in a long-term thing. So,
Well, I have a quick
it
follow-up.
is on my list with my CFIs. I need to go up and do more Foggles work, because that's something I've only done a very little bit, and I don't have an excuse to. So
I have a quick question about something you mentioned, the whole turning into a pumpkin.
yes.
Now, from what I understand, they don't have people at airports waiting at just that moment to, ramp check you when you come down. All that being said, is there something that, like, where are the edges of consequence for that in terms of insurance coverage, perhaps, or anything like that? Like, if you have I don't know.
Sure.
How does that work in terms of consequences?
What's to prevent you from flying through a cloud, right? It's the same thing. It's number one, it's up to you. Number two, it's after something happens and it's found out.
Yeah.
And yeah.
What's all this pumpkin?
Why is there pumpkin all over your plane? Yeah. No, it is kind of a weird one, because I only fly during the day, and so I don't have to think about if my plane is night equipped, except for that period from sunset to twilight, right? Where you do need to legally have that extra equipment for flying at night. And, so it's like, I just have to remember that sometimes, which is rare. So,
well, friend of the show, CFII, Nathan Ballard, which, by the way, I always wonder with our CFI friends here, it's easier just to say CFI Nate, or something, but I wonder if CFII's kind of cringe every time you call them, and inside, if they kind of stutter a little bit about, like, CFI, come on. CFII, Nathan Ballard, by the way, we always plug his YouTube channel. He makes great videos. He spends a lot of time on them, which is a blessing and a curse, but we love what he does. Good question here. He says, I'm curious to know about Ted's check ride experience for the Sport Pilot Certificate. Anything unusual or different about the topics covered as compared to a private pilot certificate?
So this gets back to, you have to be an advocate for yourself as a sport pilot, because again, nobody knows. And the sport pilot check ride is technically done by the PTS, not the ACS. I had the paper version of the PTS and of the private pilot ACS. And I spent so much time comparing them and figuring out what was different on each topic.
Oh, wow.
That I wore the bindings out of both of them. And I had to tape pages back together for my check ride. The reality, and I went to a seminar that my DPE was at before that. And she said, and I'm like, what do you do? And because she does like one a year, right? And she's like, I just give the private pilot ACS. And it's like, of course you do. Because why would you bother knowing the slight difference in the standards? For instance, let me.
I was going to say, like, what's an example of the difference?
Okay, so
because I don't have Google.
Yeah, no, it's even harder than that to find. So, for instance, there's a section that says you need to know about pilotage and dead reckoning, but then it never asks you to demonstrate dead reckoning, where you do on your private check ride. Now, she asked me to. I didn't say no, because what are you going to do? Say no to a DPE? So there's some things like that. And it doesn't have a section on emergency descent, which private does. And there is 0 Foggles time or unusual attitudes in there. And I found out that my DP didn't know that when she said, okay, why don't you pull out your Foggles now? I'm like, I don't have any because I don't have to. So, but it's that close, right? That's the only part that really differs. And the same is kind of true of the aeronautical experience. There are some slight differences, like You do have to learn to fly by instruments, but it's only called out once in the FARs, and there's no time you have to log for it. There's no simulated instrument flight or things like that, and obviously you don't log any night landings, things like that, where it's like it's just kind of in some ways it's kind of watered down on that. The other kind of notable one that's in there is instead of a 150-mile cross country with 3 stops, it's a 75-mile cross country with 2 stops. There's nothing that says you can't just do a private pilot cross country, though. So that's what I did. I just did a 150-mile because
I guess typically they have less fuel capacity.
Well, I mean, everything's just kind of simplified, right? Like fewer hours are required, so shorter distances and those types of things. So I think that's why less about the plane and more about just simplifying things. A lot.
I think Ted's gone off the rails for internet.
Pilot added on after you get the.
Ted's back? No, he's not back. Hey, Mark.
Hey,
how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. I had a question about the CFI S because I know that there's a distinction between the CFI and CFI for Sport Pilot.
Well, if Ted's done max headrooming, let's see if he can answer that for you. Ted, are you there?
So the CFI Sport Pilot can start teaching at 150 hours instead of 250.
Do you have to have a commercial rating and to be a CFIS?
No, because even a sport pilot can become a CFI Sport.
Interesting.
CFI Sport. Yeah. So now, as a sport pilot student, I can have anybody be my CFI. As a private pilot student, you don't necessarily want a sport instructor to be your instructor because that doesn't count toward your required instructor hours. So usually a private pilot would say, oh no, I don't want a CFI Sport at all. But the reality is that you have more than your minimum hours anyway. So it wouldn't really matter as much.
Would you, so as a CFI or as a sport pilot, you can be a CFI S. Is that something you would ever consider pursuing?
If there was more demand for it, I would. It's already such a niche that it's hard. The motivation for that is that schools that have a light sport plane would love to have it so that you can check people out in the plane and you can do some of the instruction in the plane. So I could do it for that. I've certainly kind of thought about doing the CFI thing or going the CFI route. So.
I believe Nate had another question that says, when selecting a CFI for the sport pilot certificate, anything in particular that a student should look for?
Well, I think the real joke there is you look for weight on light sport pilots because that's the part that is the narrowest. If you are 200 pounds, then you probably are looking for about a 120-pound instructor. If you're 100 pounds, then you can get anybody you want as your instructor. So that, I think that's part of why I met Evan's son, Sam, because Sam was on the lighter side, so he could teach in the lighter planes. The thing is, you've got to, if you are the prospective sport pilot, you've got to go into it being prepared to do your research and being prepared to advocate for this. When I went in, some of the CFIs said, I'm not sure that you can fly these planes because the school insurance only counts people that have a medical. We had to dig out the full insurance to prove that no, that's not actually the case. And there's a lot of those misunderstandings, right? And for instance, what that usually says in insurance is it's like, if a medical is required, you've got to have it. And it's not required in this case. So that's just kind of the standard joy of being a sport pilot is being able to advocate for yourself on those types of things.
Wow. So it's almost like having a seeing eye dog or something where it's like, no, I understand that you don't allow
You don't allow dogs, but here, actually, you do. And let me tell you about what you don't know. Yeah. So
S stands for special. No. CT Crosswind Adventures has a comment here. MOSAIC will likely make night VFR available to sport pilots.
Yes. So
can you talk about, for us numbnuts who don't know what MOSAIC is, can you outline that a little bit and then talk about maybe this comment?
So first of all, just like when people think of sport pilots, you need to think that there are light sport airplanes and sport pilots. And as a private pilot, you should still be interested in light sport planes. Even if you don't care about the sport pilot license, light sport planes are still a thing. You can fly them. You can exercise sport pilot privileges as a private pilot without a medical. Please go talk to an expert on that. But you can kind of downgrade, kind of like basic med. You can downgrade to that. So you need to be really aware of what LSAs are and what they mean for you. MOSAIC has been in the works for 10 years. It came out last year. It's in a final commenting period that is over on March 11th. We're already dating this thing. So it's over on March 11th. It's in the regulatory process, but it has several things in it. When it comes to the planes, they will no longer be called light sport aircraft. I think they're just calling them sport aircraft. I know it was a big deal that they're changing them because they literally have to say light sport on them. They won't have to do that anymore. It's expanding to include any plane that has a stall speed below clean stall. Oh, let's not quote numbers on this. It includes a lot of planes. It does not include Pipers. It includes Cessnas. So it's somewhere in that stall range. And so there's a lot of argument that number is probably going to change. It's probably going to go to about 60 knots for a clean stall speed. That means lots of things. One of the things that it means is an experimental aircraft kit manufacturer can sell completed planes and have them be, let's just call them light sports. They're not going to be light sports. Look, they can be sold as light sports. They've never been able to make full planes before. And that's really a big deal, right? So you can have up to 4 seats, up to a certain stall speed. There's no weight limit on them. As long as you can meet the stall speed, they kind of assume that's going to be about 3,000 pounds. And there's a 4-seat limit for the planes, not the pilots, the planes. That's really a big deal. And max speed of 250 knots. So it's going to include a lot of things. It's really great. From the sport pilot side of it, you're going to be allowed to fly a 4-seat plane so far with only 1 passenger, though. So you can still only have 1 more passenger in it. And there's a lot of rules that change and expand in there. And one of those is, hey, you can fly at night. There's a strange thing in there that says you can fly at night with a medical. I'm like, well, this is really strange. So now a sport pilot can fly at night if they have a 3rd-class medical. Huh. There's nothing in a 3rd-class medical that tests your night vision, though. And that's probably going to change. It's probably going to get pushed out. It was probably just a misunderstanding, but night flight has been expanded in there, which is really cool. So yeah, MOSAIC is a big deal. It's a big deal for the pilots. It's a big deal for the both sport pilots and obviously private pilots as well because of this. Really looking forward to it. Captain Todd, you have that, Mark? Yeah.
Well, he's hoping that MOSAIC makes Piper Tomahawks attractive to rich people, and I guess I sold my 140 too soon.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but your 140 has a stall speed that's too fast, I think. So
I don't know. I don't think so, but okay.
There's been a lot of anyway. That's all in flux, and that's why I'm being kind of hazy about it, and because it's going to shake out. I can't really do much about it. I put in my comments on the rulemaking, as did pretty much everybody, including EAA and Vans and a bunch of others. So, yeah.
So in a nutshell, would Adam's comment here be it? MOSAIC means cheaper, small aircraft. Is that a simplification?
I hope so. Yeah. they're not as cheap as everyone thought, but anything that has been made in this century is crazy expensive. And certainly it's less than buying a brand new 172. And that's great. So plus, a lot of them have more modern engines. And, so there's a plane that I look at, for instance, that goes about 200 knots. It's called the Risen. And yeah, it flies about 200 knots. It's got a really slow stall speed. It's a adjustable, constant speed prop, retractable landing gear, and it's really fast, slick, Rotax powered plane. So things like that wouldn't be an option in the past, and they're an option for you as well. Like all of a sudden, you want to buy a plane that flies 200 knots. Great, here you go.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that would be that'd be a change of pace. This is not really directly related, but Adam had just commented. Adam and I both trained at the same place at Harmony Air, and one of the planes that. So the longtime owner of the business just sold the business, and now he's liquidating his airplanes that were his kind of personal aircraft that were attached to the business. And the plane that I soloed in, and that I know Adam flew a lot as well, and some other friends of ours here, have a sweet spot for this plane, 5880 Echo, a Cessna 172 November model. We got notice that it is for sale for what was stated as $134,000 firm. I was actually surprised when I saw how low the total time was on it, considering how that plane has just been an absolute workhorse, for a long time. It's got the 180 horsepower STC. It's a great plane. It's a vibey plane. It's just, I love it. And I definitely felt like I got a little attached to it when I was training in it. That was the one I preferred, even if it had lesser things in some areas. But it just had me thinking, $134,000, even for, I don't know. It's weird how like the 172 just remains, because of its training viability, just so overpriced for what it is. And then, when I thought, well, 134 for that plane is still kind of a good deal. Not that I'm in the market, but I just thought, and then I started having flashbacks of landings that I had in that plane. Like,
how many hours did the airframe have on it?
It doesn't matter, because I flew it in training.
It has all of the hours. Yes.
I want to say it was maybe 3,000 hours or something. I have to look, but it just wasn't, crazy. But anyway, I just remembered when I did my first cross country, and it was just going to Bowling Green and back 52 miles. And that was the first time that I had landed on a 150 foot wide runway, I think, or maybe the second time or something. And boy, do things look different. And boy, is your judgment of where you are relative to the ground different when you're not used to that. And man, if I was where I thought I was in space, it was going to be an absolute greaser. It was like, I was so excited at the round out and flare, or whatever you want to call it, of this landing. I was like, oh yes, this is Greasetown, USA. And then all of a sudden I started to see the relative passing by things going up downy as opposed to left righty. And I realized that I was just sinking. And then and then you realize the plane is stalled. Like, this is, and you can't think fast enough at that stage to, you just can't process things very fast.
It wasn't your fault, Brian. The runway was 2 feet too low.
It was about 430, 6 feet too low. Yeah. Whatever it was. But man, I landed so hard. It was the hardest landing I've ever had. And I remember thinking, there's no way that avionics didn't get, rattled with, pins popping off of stuff, or, I just thought, anything that could possibly come loose in this old 1970s plane has just come loose. There is and these tires, I'm not even going to look. They are flat. Yeah. Like I exploded these tires.
Yeah.
And so I just remember all I needed to do was taxi back and keep going. I pulled off to the ramp. I I just sat there with the engine running still, because I was sort of half really wanting to check out the plane and half just petrified to understand the reality of what I'd done to it. And so I just kind of sat there with the plane running for a while, just kind of quaking and just trying to, and then realizing how much of all that was in my head and that really wasn't that bad, and then just carry on. But anyway,
so the Harmony guy has just lowered his price just a little bit from this podcast.
that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like,
half price now.
He said the price is firm, but I feel like I can use public opinion to drive that down by just saying what I alone, and I know I have at least 2 or 3 other friends that trained in that plane that can attest to equally bad landings in that plane. No, but it is just I don't know, when you think about LSAs and like what you can get for the money in terms of speed and efficiency and technology and all that, in a much more approachable package, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be at or nearly TAA and have cruise control. I'm reading the comments on the side, which I should not do. Have autopilot on them, which is, I thought everything did, right? I'm still training in these modern planes that have glass and touch screens and autopilot. So
how to screw up Ted? Give him a 6-pack?
I'm totally spoiled. Yes. So
you're like, I like to play mine. I have like a Nintendo 64 emulator on the second screen because I don't really even use it. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, CT Crosswind Adventures said, what are your thoughts on MOSAIC currently not expanding sport privileges to more than 1 passenger, yet 4-seat aircraft are allowed? First of all, I'm really glad they're allowing 4-seat aircraft. Getting something that's a little bit bigger to haul things in is fantastic. I would love to have it expanded to 4 people. The rationale in the huge long MOSAIC document is putting things on a continuum. And so they say sport is at one end of this and private is here. And we can prove that this is safe in this way and that kind of thing. So part of what they're saying is we don't want to let sport pilots do everything that a private pilot can do. It's like, well, yeah, but a private pilot can already fly at almost a 19,000 pound plane. So we're far off from that. So yeah, it would be nice to have 4 people. I'm glad that the planes are getting bigger. That's an improvement in the right direction. So, yeah.
Mark
came in with the actual numbers. Yeah.
Mark R. Tipper, MOSAIC would remove current LSA weight limit of 1320 and instead be performance based, such as a 54 knot max VS1, allowing airplanes with gross weights up to 3,000 to be flown by sport pilots. Okay. Is that fact?
So VS1 is what I was looking for, which is the clean stall speed of 54 knots. So that's the numbers being hoped for by people like Vans, who have a few aircraft that have a higher stall speed than that. They really hope that number gets improved, gets raised. Piper owners hoping it gets raised so that their planes are included in it. So it's all in this like 50 to 60 knot number. And yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. Somebody's going to come up with these numbers. I don't want to get too into the weeds on what it's going to be, right? Because it's just, who knows what's going to happen. But.
Well, Banjo Pilot has a great one here. He says, my CFI had me do short field landings for all 10 of my night landings. That first landing is the reason you should never buy an old flight school plane. Have you ever had, Mark, how are your landings going these days?
Oh, my landings are,
they're fine, right? Like you're fine.
They're fine. They're not too, I share an aspect with you where I kind of get over the top perfectionist on my landings. Mm-hmm. And I hate it. And so the transition to from the 140, which had a very, very light feel, very light engine, had 0320 engine. And now I have a 6-cylinder 0540 engine, and it takes some actual strength to pull the to pull the nose back. And I'm not I'm not where I was with
Yeah.
the 140. I'm not, and I don't like it.
Well, I mean, you probably have to trim a lot. We probably have to do a lot more up trim in that plane. I don't know. I don't know how that works with when you have that many cylinders in front of you. But now, is it possible that you know how people pack? Like I remember Michael Young when we went. He had in his Cirrus. He had in the back of it. He had like one of those scooters, right? Like when we were showing up for the fly-in battery powered thing. He pulls out. He's just cruising all around. Is there a way that, or would it be something you would consider, Mark, to get a light sport to put in the back of your 235? And then
You
that
could
way,
probably carry it.
that way, like, so you can just like take it with you and then get out wherever you are and then use that to kind of buzz around, where you are without having to burn that much fuel.
Mark,
Yeah,
Mark
Brian,
needs
I've
landing bricks in the back. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
No, I've thought about doing that exactly that thing.
Yeah, Nathan Ballard says the folks that design Cessna landing gear are the same people that boldly stare at the sun during an eclipse. Nothing can break them and nothing can break their gear, despite Brian's best efforts. Thank Nathan. Yeah.
Mark, you kind of joke with me about, my trying to be a perfectionist about landing. I mean, honestly, since I'm not yet instrument rated or these other things, I can just put a lot of energy into that kind of stuff, really. You're doing a lot more stuff. But all that being said, I had such a hard time learning and I just murdered myself psychologically trying to learn. And so I'm just, this is a bad example.
I'm honestly scared to fly you in my airplane. I watch the way that you are a perfectionist about landing, and I'm like, oh, he's not going to like this. Unless it's an absolute gracer, he's going to be like,
No.
well, here's what you could have done.
It's really
on the center line.
It's really
On the
hard.
center line.
I am a centerline junkie, but it's hard to get a good greaser in any kind of Cherokee. It's just not the we've talked about that, right? Like the did we landing is hard to do, or harder to do, I think, than in a Cessna or something. But yeah, I mean, I think that you got to have something that you're irrationally focused on, right? And that's kind of the fun of it. And my whole thing is like, I just want. At the very least, I want to be able to fly the plane well. Forget all the technical things and all the ratings and all this stuff. I just want to be able to fly the plane that I fly as well as I can possibly fly it. Now, all that being said, Mark, you are no slouch. And you can do these maneuvers now, right? That I don't even know how to spell, much less do.
A chandelle. That's the eights on pylons. Those are my favorites.
Isn't there one though that you do in the commercial that's was it the lazy eights where it's
lazy eights,
or you just kind of don't do anything? Like
yes.
you just that's what I want to do.
I pulled up a comment from Biff earlier. And he says, Ted does some amazing flying to really epic locations. Are there any limitations to the certificate that you feel hold you back from any particular experience that you would like to have? There's some. I talked about night and instrument. There's some starting to understand the value of that. One of the other limitations is sport pilots are allowed to go to 10,000 feet or 2,000 feet above terrain, whichever is greater. How you define that is interesting. If you're flying over the very peak of a mountain, you can go 12,000 feet over a 10,000 foot mountain or whatever it is above that. What if you're going right next to it? What if you're going between two mountains? Do you have to descend and exactly stay 2,000 feet above it? If you're anytime you're above that 10,000 feet, right? And some people misunderstand that and think you can only go to 2,000 feet, which is obviously totally wrong. But so there's some different interpretations on what 2,000 feet above ground level means. For instance, the number on your sectional is one number, or it can be the number off the peak, or it can be between the two things you're flying between. So that is one thing that I, in the interest of safety, have had to ignore and being in the mountains in Northern California. And
well, I assume that the part, I think it's part 91 rule that says something along the lines of, in the interest of safety, you can violate any.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, then that's what we're doing all the time.
Yeah. No, but
I'm very safety conscious.
I filled out an ASRS because I couldn't safely descend.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, to wrap up the sport pilot topic, I wanted to just give you an opportunity, Ted, to say anything that you would want to say to someone that maybe tuned into this that is maybe just, I mean, obviously there's governing circumstances, medicals and things like that. But at the end of the day, what would you say to somebody that's, I'm thinking about the people that are really looking for the most cost-effective and lowest barriers to entry way into beginning being a pilot and flying?
The argument for sport is if you have any medical concerns that you might get stuck on a medical for years or get denied, go sport. Don't start a medical and get denied and not have the option to do any flying. That's the number one thing. I don't think for most people going sport is the way to go otherwise.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, that's a very optimistic point of view. No,
exactly.
That's a very uplifting spirit for the end of this show. But
come in, the water's warm, right? I do a lot of flying, No,
but I mean, there's something for everybody though, and that's what's cool. So now you were talking about sort of flying in between mountains, and it made me think of two things. One, it made me think of what Ben shared with us that he was doing today that we want to maybe have more of a conversation with him about. But he was flying in a location today in the north, like it's in a place that even Ted would consider the Northwest. And it was so stunning, and it was so ridiculous to see where he was today. And it made me realize this is the second point, which is we never really mentioned at the top of the show that there's a reason why he's just sort of not here. I don't think we mentioned that. So anyway, he's away on a trip where he can't be here. So Ben will be back. And, Mark, thank you so much for being here. I can't say you couldn't have done any better, man. You did a great job. I think everybody should give Mark a hand.
Well, I was happy to fill in and be the substitute Ben without an accent.
The opposite accent.
When you need someone with a commercial pilot rating that can't do anything with it, I'm your man.
Yeah, you got like all the qualifications, but you're like, but I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to be an instructor. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. No, I really do think that you should just buy a King Air. Just putting it out there. We've already got a GoFundMe started for Ben's TBM. We can start a GoFundMe for you.
So when that happens, can I come sleep at your house because my wife is gonna kick me out?
Oh yeah, it's no problem.
You have a plane to sleep in then.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, no, but it's been awesome to have you on, Mark, and you're as intrinsic to this podcast and community as anybody has ever been. So thank you for being here, man. You're a mensch and a genius, and I'm trying to think of any other superlatives. But you're Midwestern, so I can't really think of anything.
There we go. You got one thing right. That part you got right.
Yeah. No, but so I guess we'll go ahead and just wrap this up unless you guys have anything else real quick. You want to make sure we get out there. You guys good?
Yeah, good.
All right. So now I'm going to do I did the intro and I mispronounced the name of our podcast. So I'm just going to try to get out of here unscathed. And can't wait for Ben to come back. It's amazing how not easy this can be, right? He does it so gracefully.
Yes.
But yes, so ultimately, everyone, we appreciate you listening, being part of the community, and you guys are all our pilot friends. We appreciate you. Don't forget to join us on Patreon. and you can hear more tall tales and hyperbole. And everything is basically accessible through midlifepilotpodcast.com to join our Patreon, to do a PayPal drop, to figure out where you can access all the episodes, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're everywhere on all the things, doing all the things. We definitely want your feedback. There's a form on the website where you can, file formal complaints or, praise Ted. It's really kind of one or the other is kind of what I figured out is what's happening with that. But it's been an absolute pleasure, everybody. So without further ado, I guess we will go on now and sign off, and we'll enter the CTAF chat of our Discord for our after show, which is yet another Patreon cool thing that people do. So we're going to jump out of here and head over to, is it CTAF? Yeah, it's CTAF. Yep. CTAF channel, voice channel, and our Discord. So we'll see everybody over there. Thanks everybody for supporting us and being so great with the comments. And we will see you next week for a topic that I don't remember what it is, but I'm looking forward to it. Thanks everybody.
Episode 66, Night Flag.
Awesome. Love it.
See y'all.
Really appreciate it. See you everybody.